Uh, Hello, everyone. This is a recording of the presentation that Catherine and I and Dr. McKay gave this morning as part of Faculty First Week. Unfortunately, my technology, for whatever reason, did not record the program as I had originally intended. So I'm re recording this, if you will, so that at least you have something to refer to if you were in attendance or if you weren't in attendance, and you can at least see what was presented. So I apologize for that. You won't have the questions that were asked by the directors during the particular presentation this morning, but I'm going to try to give you kind of the highlights and let you watch this at your own pace. If you have any questions afterwards, please don't hesitate to contact either myself or Catherine Lowry. Questions about Heliocampus will be answered, however, on Wednesday this week when Dr. McKay will be giving the part two of this. So this is Program Review Refresher Part 1, and this is really understanding program review. And so why is it that we've been doing program reviews over the whole time that I've been in the associate provost role? And what I want to try to get across to you all is that program review needs to be more than just our programmatic outcomes. You all are well aware of our annual need to report and evaluate our student learning outcomes and our institutional effectiveness things that we do as part of our SAC-COC requirements. And those are very, very important. We still have to do those. We certainly think that leads to improvements in our programs and better outcomes for our students. So we definitely still need to be doing that, and we need to have a great focus on that. However, we also need to be mindful of the fact that our programming also needs to be concerned about student enrollments, student graduation numbers, where our students are being placed in jobs and in professional settings, etc. And the reason is because we have IHL productivity metrics and stipulations. And so when we have a program that's on IHL stipulation, we actually have to go to IHL and defend that program so that it doesn't get axed, if you will. I'll just be blunt about it, by IHL. And so that costs a lot of political capital when you have to go and defend programs for low productivity metrics. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. Also, we have set internal productivity metrics that allow us, if we can meet these more aspirational metrics, we'll never have to go to IHL to defend a program again. And so that's why we set some internal productivity metrics. And again, I'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. Also, as we look at our programs, it gives us an opportunity to think about revitalizing those programs so that students have greater interest, meeting student needs, if you will, and also the possibility of needing to sunset programs from time to time. Faculty who are in programs that are not of high productivity in terms of the number of graduates, maybe it's time to let that program play out and take those faculty resources and put them into a more student-centered program that has a lot of student interest. So there's all of that. And third, I'd like to also say that one of the things that I'm hoping happens in the near future is that we start to be more proactive about our program reviews as opposed to reactive. All of the program reviews that we've done up to this point really have been reactive in terms of how many graduates have you had in the last 3 years so that we can get ahead of IHL stipulation issues. But I think if we can pivot and be more proactive in our program review to where programs really take the lead on program review every so often with their other things that they review, I think we'll be in a better place. And so, as you can see here, in my opinion, healthy academic programming is a combination of several things. Obviously, you have to have excellent faculty, and I think we have that. I think that's check mark right there. We've got that. We've got processes in place that allow us to have good degree plans in place. So check, we've got that. But also you have to have student enrollment. You can't have graduates if you don't have students. And so having programs focus a little bit more on student enrollment metrics, I think, can get us to a more proactive program review than what we have had in the past. Because if we can notice what's happening with enrollment trends ahead of time, we can think about how we can revitalize that program to increase student demand. And then fourth, we need to have our students graduate and have good job placements. And by job placements, I don't mean just necessarily in the workforce, but of course that is part of it. But also many of our programs prepare our students to go on to professional schools, be it medical school, law school, whatever the case may be, or graduate school in general, right? So I consider that part of our placement strategy as well. I just list jobs here, but when our students leave with their bachelor's degree, they need to be prepared for that next step in their life. And for some students, that's going to be going on to a job in the workplace, going on to the military to serve our country, or to graduate or professional school to further their education and achieve their goals. And so I do firmly believe that USM is judged by the quality of our programming, but also by the quality of our students who graduate and end up in the workplace or in graduate school or whatever the case may be. So if you were to go back and look at the academic master plan from a few years ago, you would see that we have a listing of what our USM productivity metrics are. And the provost set these to be higher than our IHL minimum metrics for a reason. And that had to do with we no longer really want to spend our political capital with IHL on defending low producing programs in terms of student graduates. And so what you would see if you were to look in that old document, or that older document, I shouldn't say, it's still the active document, you would see bachelor's programs, we set a target of 36. As a minimum. Again, not every program needs to be at 36. We certainly need programs that are much higher than that, and so on and so forth. Now, you'll also know that I've become a big fan of not thinking so much about emphasis, because really what we have at this institution are programs. What we call emphases occupy a line on our inventory. They occupy a slot on our bulletin. Students can apply, and these things appear on student transcripts. So they really do fit the definition from a SAC-COC perspective of a program. And in fact, we have to send SAC-COC copies of our bulletins when we undergo reviews of various sorts, and they look in our bulletin to see what type of programming we offer. That's how they determine programs at the institution. So let's just focus on the program level as we currently think about it, and let's not focus on the emphasis, because again, each one of our lines on our inventory really is a program. And if we were able to meet across the board these minimum metrics for each and every program, we would never have to go to IHL and have a stipulation issue. We would be going to IHL for other purposes, more positive purposes, I should say, but not stipulation issues. And just the other day, we received our dreaded August list from IHL of stipulation programs, or programs that are going to be on stipulation, and we have to address that with IHL coming forward. So it's been a long-term goal of the provost. It's been a long-term goal of mine to get USM completely off IHL's stipulation radar. Now, you might be thinking that 36 for an undergraduate program may be too high, but what I want to focus on is that it's double the IHL minimums, which, again, if we can achieve that or even get close to it, then we never have an IHL issue. But also note here, it's actually less than our average number of graduates over 3 years on a per program basis at the undergraduate level. So at USM, we average about 42 graduates per program over a 3-year period. And that's, how many graduates do you get in year 1, year 2, and year 3? So we're still setting this minimum target. Again, I want to focus on that. It's a minimum target. It's not an aspirational target. You really want to be better than that. But we are setting our targets to be even below what our current average is, because we do have some programs that have an awful large number of graduates every year, and so they kind of skew that average a little bit. But nonetheless, we are. These are the numbers that we have set for ourselves. I do have to say that over the last 3 years, we have 32 programs, and these are undergraduate programs. Okay, as I'm using the definition of program, we have 32 programs right now that have had fewer than 10 graduates over the last 3 years. Nowhere coming near what we have set as our graduation minimums for undergraduate programs, nor meeting IHL's definition of how many graduates we should be generating over 3 years. And so this is part of the reason why we continue to have programming that is on stipulation. And that is one of the reasons why we continuously have to do this program review, so that we have information to go to IHL with to defend some of these programs. And again, we're trying to get away from having to defend based on our productivity metrics. So I hope I've kind of answered some of the questions about why we need to look at enrollment trends, but I'm going to dive into this just a little bit more, because again, our previous program review paradigm, if you will, really was reactive. We looked at how many graduates you had over the last 3 years. IHL looks at how many graduates you had over the last 3 years, and there's nothing that we can really do about that at this point, right, other than go and defend why we think in the future that won't be the case. And I don't find that very empowering, to be honest with you. I think it's a lot more empowering to the faculty and to the programs, the program directors, etc., to be ahead of these trends. And looking at enrollments are just as important, in my view, as looking at the number of graduates. Because again, you can't have graduates without students enrolled. And let me give you a couple of examples. I'm not picking on anybody here today, so I've blacked out who these actual academic plans in schools are. But what you're seeing here is an example of a program that would not have reached our radar, would not have been on IHL's stipulation list. This program, and again, this is an actual program, over the last 3 years has had 246 graduates out of that program, and that's great. That is a solid number. It's high. It's many-fold higher than what we've set as our minimums internally. And so you might be looking at this and wondering why I'm showing this particular program. Well, if you look at our student contribution piece out of Helio Campus, what you'll see is that this particular program is actually quite expensive. So since this is an undergraduate program, we're going to look at the upper level coursework. You'll see that they're making a contribution of $12 per credit hour at a cost inefficiency of 96%. And so what that means is that we have to put in 96 cents into this program to get $1 of billable revenue for the university. And that's expensive. And of course, we all know that there are going to be programs that are expensive, but I would argue that there is room here for this program to find some efficiencies and help out. Okay, so, but, based on the old program review model, this program would not have tripped any circuit breakers or any flashing lights towards us of, hey, something needs to be looked at here. But when you look at enrollment trends, you see a very different story. And so what I'm showing you here is the enrollment trend for this program over the last 10 years. This is data out of Helio Campus. So here you're looking at the actual raw data straight from Helio Campus. Here I've imported the data into Excel and done a linear regression analysis. What you can find is that the decline of enrollment in this program over the last 10 years has been linear. And it's a very strong correlation, right? 0.92 is the R square, if you're interested in that. This is the past 10 years. And actually, this morning, before I gave the talk, I looked at where their enrollment would be for this fall, and it would fall somewhere right around here on the graph. And so, again, that seems to be in line with this linear decline in enrollment for this program. So, if you look at the data for the best fit line here, this program's been losing just about 18 students per year over the last 10 years. And if we extrapolate that out, we know that in the next 5 or 10 years, those number of graduates that they've been used to getting, 246 over 3 years, that's going to start to dwindle. And if we wait too long to address this issue, it's going to be too late. And so that's one of the reasons why I like looking at these enrollment trends, because we now have enough data in Heliocampus where we can start to get ahead of this data, right? We can start to ask real meaningful questions and have the data at hand to try to answer some of those questions to see where we can make tweaks, revitalizations, whatever the case may be, to try to turn some of these trends around. And just for transparency here, I always tell folks that enrollment at the institution is a function of enrollment of our programs, not the other way around. Students come to the University of Southern Mississippi for the quality of our programming, and I firmly believe that. And so having programs that increase enrollment will result in increased enrollment at the institution, which will result in a better situation for all concerned. Now let's look at another program. Let's look at what I call Program 2 here. If you were to look at this program, what you'll see is that over the last 3 years they've had 63 graduates. You might say, well, that's a lot less than 246, and that's true. But when you look at the other metrics associated with this, you see some very positive things. So for example, again, since this is an undergraduate program that we're looking at the upper level coursework here. You see that this particular program is making a contribution to the university of $176 per student credit hour at a cost inefficiency of just under 49%, meaning that the university puts in 49 cents for every dollar of billable revenue. So again, even though the number of graduates isn't as high as the other program, these metrics actually look quite good. And when you look at the enrollment trend for this particular program, you see exactly the opposite of what we saw for the previous program. You see a continuous linear correlation to an increase in student demand for this program. And so, again, I also looked for the enrollment for this program for this fall. And in fact, the data point would be up here. Again, they are up once again this year, I believe by about 18 students actually over last fall. And so again, they're following this nice trend upwards. They're gaining about 11 students per year out of this particular program. Now, at some point in the future, they will be able to make up some of the difference that we're losing in the other program. But we all know that these trends won't go on forever. Nothing goes up or nothing goes down forever. But that's where the trends are. And so, they're gaining about 11. The other program's losing about 18. So we're losing more in the one program than we're gaining in the others. And so that's why all programs really need to come together and start thinking about ways in which they can improve efficiencies, they can improve enrollments, and get those numbers of graduates up to a better number. Okay, so you all know that you received documents last spring about program review that was supposed to have been due in April. We changed that due date as a result of some requests from the Council of Directors to move it to a later date. And so we moved a lot of those program reviews to mid-September. So these are coming due here within the next month or so. You all received a instrument that looks like this. This was the instrument that everybody received to deal with the program review. I sincerely hope that this is the last time we do a reactive program review. I hope we move towards a proactive program review in the future. We're working towards that right now, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But let's just review real quick a few things that you need to keep in mind as you prepare to submit your stuff in September on this particular instrument that we have. The first thing that you're going to have to do is review your SIP code, your title, and your definition. I know many of you don't necessarily think that the SIP code matters that much, but the SIP code matters an awful lot, actually. And my colleagues in institutional research will tell you that it matters tremendously because it determines how we report things to the federal government. It determines how we report things to accrediting bodies sometimes. It impacts how we appear on third-party recruiting websites, actually. So review of the SIP codes matters, and you really do need to have the appropriate SIP code for your program. It's in our best interest all the way around to make sure that we are representing ourselves as best we can in the best light possible so that we can attract students to the institution. The other thing that you're going to look up are the number of graduates that you've had over the past 3 years. You're going to fill that out in the boxes that you see there. You're going to be able to find this information on the Institutional Research website. We have made that available to anybody who has a USM ID. You can go to the Institutional Research webpage and log in under the program review, and you'll see right there at the top that 3-year program trends, which is enrollment and degrees. So we don't put that in HelioCampus because HelioCampus, we've only got so many access licenses, and we believe that, pretty much so everybody needs to have access to this information. So we've made that publicly, well, I say publicly, we've made that publicly available as far as the university community is concerned. You do have to log in with your SOAR credentials, but anybody with a valid SOAR ID and credential can get in. Okay. So you're going to find that information there. We want to make this very easy to obtain information. And then the other thing that you're going to have to do as a piece of evidence is get that 10-year enrollment trend. And you can get that out of HelioCampus. You can download that out of HelioCampus. You can cut and paste using your favorite snipping tool, whatever you want to do. But you're going to have to get this enrollment information, and it's going to have to be part of your analysis. So you'll see that the instrument that we've developed actually is fairly straightforward to put together. Where it will take you the most time, right, is not gathering the data anymore, but actually doing the analysis and coming up with an action plan if necessary that's based on this data-informed information that you'll be getting. So, in previous times, it would take you an awful long time to gather this type of information. But with HelioCampus and with the emphasis on IR to be more of a business intelligence entity, you can actually have this information at your fingertips in just a few seconds. So gathering the data is no longer a bottleneck. Where the discussions really should be focusing on an analysis of that data and coming up with action plans that are actually actionable and can have the potential to improve our situation by capitalizing on our strengths and minimizing our limitations. So where do we go from here? Once you submit that program review document, we're going to go through those, and we will give those to the appropriate program review committees at both undergraduate and graduate council. And during the fall, they will be going through those program reviews like they have in the past, and you will receive information back probably in the early spring from those councils about your analysis and your action plans, and maybe even with some suggestions about revitalization and or sunsetting. Uh, we are going to move to a more proactive review process moving forward. What you see here are 8 items that I think every program should really be thinking about on a regular basis, that is annually, just like we think about student learning outcomes. I think we need to be thinking about these things as an important part of our program health. I think we need to be thinking about our 10-year fall semester enrollment data for every program on the inventory. And we need to be asking questions about that when we see the trend. Why are we trending up? Why are we staying flat? Why are we trending down? Are these internal forces, external forces? Is the demographics just shifting for the demand of this program? Can we revitalize to help change that? We're going to be looking at second year retention rates. And while second year retention rates certainly is something that the institution is very, very concerned with, we recruit a student here, we want them to stay and get their education with us. We do understand that there are going to be some programs where students will move from one major to another, and we certainly don't want to count that against anybody. If a student comes in as a chemistry major and determines that it would be better for them to move over to history or English, that's great. Students need to be able to move to wherever they think that they will be able to be successful and find their interest. But nonetheless, a program really needs to be looking at this information too, because if you have low second year retention rates, you need to be asking questions about why that may be. And if the answer is because students are picking other majors, I think one would need to take a look at their major. Are we attracting students like we should be? Is there something internally that we could do better? Again, this is all about continuous improvement. The third thing that I think we really need to be focusing on an awful lot is our course success metrics for courses that are within our degree plans, because as you all know, students who do not get C's or better typically do not return, typically take longer to get their degrees because we've created these barriers. I'm in no way suggesting that we water down our curriculum at all, but I do think that when we find courses that have high levels of DFs and Ws, we should be asking questions. Why is it that when students come to this particular class, do they seem to struggle as a whole? And what is it that we can do as faculty members or as program directors or as program coordinators to try to address some of that while still maintaining our academic rigor that we expect of college level coursework? Again, nothing about watering anything down, but if there's things that we can do internally to help improve the success of our students, I think we're morally obligated to do that. Of course, we're going to look at the number of graduates from the past 3 years. That's not going away. We need to look at the junior graduation rate for undergraduate programs. By the time a student hits their mark of being a junior undergraduate, they really belong to you as a student. They should be kind of cemented into their major at that point, settled down, and that we're making sure that they move from the junior point on to graduation. So very, very important that we look at that. For graduate programs, we need to look at time to degree, or time to degree completion as it's listed there. We know that there are a number of graduate programs where students are taking a fairly long period of time to get to either their master's or their PhD degree. And it's important that we spend a little bit of time and focus on that. Are there things that we are doing that hinder degree completion at the graduate level? Are we putting too many requirements in place? Are we giving students too much time to achieve their milestones? Are we not offering the coursework in a timely manner that allow students to complete their degree on time? Or could it just simply be that the demographics for this particular program have changed such that we have a lot of part-time students in this program, and do we need to provide them the resources to where they can be successful in a more timely fashion as part-time graduate students? And then, of course, we need to look at that upper-level program costing for undergraduate programs. That's how we determine whether or not we are achieving some efficiencies. So, that upper-level program costing is important because that's where your undergraduate students are taking the bulk of their major level courses. And it's very, very important that we get our efficiencies in place there, making sure that we're not offering too many low-enrolled courses, that we work to try to make sure that our courses have healthy enrollments, in addition to having good success metrics. And then, of course, we want to look at that at the graduate level as well. But for the graduate level, we look at all graduate coursework, not just the upper level coursework for that. So that's really what I had to talk about today. And I put a picture there of a chessboard because I think a proactive process allows us to start playing chess, thinking a couple moves ahead, getting ahead of our trends, making sure that we notice issues when they arise and address them early so that they don't become problems. I think that's where we all want to be. And the data is just so deep now, and we have it at our fingertips that we can really ask some very serious, very moving questions, if you will, about our programs in general. So I'm just going to finish with one last piece, and you all should probably have a question for me at this point of how do we know that this program review paradigm that we've had works? And that's a fair question. How have we been assessing program review? Because we're asking you to assess things. How do we in my office assess whether or not this whole program review stuff has had any success? And we use the data just like you all do. And so what I have here is data going back to academic year 2015-2016. This is just one piece of data that is used to inform us on the success of the program review. But what you notice is that ever since I've been involved in this administrative work, we've been under program review. And so that goes back to 2017. I took this position in 2017. You'll notice that this data goes back to when Dr. Mosier became provost, 2015, 2016-ish. And you can see at that time, at the institutional level, all of our programs combined, when you looked at it, were making a contribution per credit hour to the institution of just $50. That is, when we looked at the billable revenue and we subtracted the actual costs, we had a contribution of $50 per credit hour. That's really a very small number. And our cost inefficiency at that time was over 81%, meaning that as an institution, we were putting in 81 cents out of out of our resources to get $1 of billable revenue. Okay, so not a very strong business model there. But what you see is at that time we really started to implement more robust program reviews that focused on the number of graduates that we were producing, the enrollments, that kind of thing. And what you can see is over the years, as we've done this, as we've consolidated, as we've sunset, as we've revitalized programming, our contribution per credit hour has gone up consistently. We're now at $126 per credit hour. And our cost inefficiency has dropped dramatically. We went from 81% to 61.5% over this time period. And so this really tells us that we are making headway with program review, that the actions that we are taking are making a positive contribution to this institution. And so I hope, seeing that you understand that we do assess this as well. We We don't do this just so that you have to go through a set of processes. This really does, the work that you all have been doing really has made a difference to the institution. We're in a better position resource-wise because of it, and we still have room to grow. We have set as a goal at this institution to get overall as an institution where we're close to $200 per credit hour on a contribution basis. Now, how did we set that? It really is kind of a North Star. It's something to shoot for. But on average, it costs us about $200 per credit hour to deliver our programming at the institution. And we believe that we should at least match in contribution what we cost. And so we have set a goal of $200 per credit hour. And what I would argue is over the last several years, we've made significant strides towards that end. And there are a number of programs that are already exceeding that. I can tell you that for sure. So we still have a lot of work ahead of us, but we're certainly in a better position than we were just a few years ago as a result of the hard work that each and every one of you do to try to find efficiencies, grow enrollments in our programs, and offer programming that, quite frankly, that students want and gets them to where they want to be in life. So, again, sorry that this isn't the real recording. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact either me or Catherine Lowry about this in terms of what's due in mid-September. On Wednesday, Dr. McKay will be offering the part 2 of this program refresher, where she will be talking about the Helio Campus data in more depth than I did here today, and actually will be covering more data. So please encourage folks to attend that particular Faculty First Week presentation as well. Thank you all, and have a good evening.